Just ahead, we take you to a family farm near Palmer. The secret to growing vegetables so sweet and full of flavor.
There's no comparison.
Family Farms, then and now, still at the heart of the Alaska State Fair. And after 80 years, why there's still no fair quite like it. Those fair contests don't always go as expected, just ask Dale Marshall. Yet despite last year's disappointment, see how his passion for pumpkins prevails.
Alaska, where there are old triumphs, but also new frontiers, with challenges as great as the state itself, but a belief the best is yet to come. Bringing you the faces, the places, and the spirit of the last frontier. This is Frontiers with Rhonda McBride.
Welcome to our program as we take time out to look at families, farms, and fun as we mark the 80th anniversary of the Alaska State Fair, which gets underway next week. But first, we start off with a visit to a family farm in Palmer, and Megan Mazurek spent some time with the Vanderwiels, who very much represent the lifestyle of the fair.
It is, Rhonda, and for a lot of people, the fair means agriculture. Kids flock to the petting zoo and farm animals. People ooh and ah over 100-pound cabbages and pumpkins. But behind these farms, growing giant vegetables and raising cattle, are the farmers and the families carrying on a legacy that for some stretches back generations.
We all have a lot of different jobs.
Michelle Keys comes from a long line of farmers.
So I would be the 11th generation farmer.
Her dad is Ben Vanderwiel.
See, this is not bad. About twice the size of a California head.
He's been farming in Palmer for almost 50 years. He and his wife moved to Alaska from the Netherlands in 1967.
Oh, it was difficult. Just the two of us, you know, and didn't know anybody here. But, well, it grew on you. There's something about this area. You know, you either love it or you hate it.
You felt a connection?
Yeah, I did.
To the land?
I really did, yeah.
The love of the land shows. The Vanderwiel family has built an empire over the years. This is just a small portion of the farm. In this field, he grows cauliflower, cabbage, broccoli, and 4 main types of lettuce, including romaine.
Romaine lettuce is used for Caesar salads. Yeah, we sell a lot of it. We have some really good customers, Beartooth, Moose's Tooth. You know, they have that famous Caesar salad.
The black and chicken Caesar salad,
yeah,
one of my favorites.
Here it is. This is where they made it out of. And the grocery stores, they buy a lot of it too.
But their main bread and butter, potatoes. More than half of their 200 acres of farmland is dedicated to growing them. Chances are, if you've bought Alaskan-grown potatoes, it was grown right here in this field.
That label of Alaska grown, that just helps us so much, and the consumers asking for our product in the store, that just goes miles.
What we can grow, the stores are very loyal to us, and they buy 100% Alaska grown when it's available, and if you have the quality and if you're competitively priced.
The Vanderwiels deliver fresh produce about twice a week. This lettuce being boxed will soon be sold on store shelves at nearby grocery stores like Fred Meyer and Car Safeway.
Right now I have 6 kids out there. They can harvest about 60 boxes of lettuce in about an hour and a half. I just want to make sure that Caleb has enough to finish his box.
Harvesting is something Michelle knows well. She's done it since she was a kid.
When they were teenagers, they couldn't get away from these fields quick enough.
I'm sure. You put them to work.
Yeah, of course. My wife and I are very fortunate that all our 3 children had a good brain. They all went to college, and then surprise, 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 they all came back.
All 3 working in the family business.
My daughter kind of now runs the show. My son has a degree in crop science, and then my oldest son, he's over at the farm delivering.
It's been a long legacy and a lot of hard work and just building year after year.
To keep the Vanderwiel farm in the family for generations to come.
If Michelle quits, I'm quitting too.
Yeah, no pressure there, right? Huh?
The Wiel family was named the Alaska State Fair's Farm Family of the Year in 2001. Since then, they have helped to provide the produce for the reception held every year for the farm family, which receives the honor. And Rhonda, they also provide some of the produce for the fair booths, including the infamous Taco Dan's. He's been buying lettuce from them for nearly 25 years.
Boy, that's a long relationship, but that's what this fair is about, relationships. Now, what other varieties of crops do the Wiels grow?
Well, like I said, potatoes, their main bread and butter. Carrots too, though. They harvest that in October, a little bit later. And then they also do 4 types of cauliflower, 4 types of lettuce, and then they also have broccoli as well. And they don't just sell the russet potatoes, they do the smaller, rounder potatoes, and they sell those to the Alaska Chip Company and provides their potatoes for that too.
So one family has a lot of influence, and what do you think has made them so successful?
Consistency. I mean, Ben and his wife moved there in '67, and then he said there was probably 20 plus potato farmers and cattle farmers, and since then those have kind of gone away. Kids decide to move on and not keep farming in the business, and they sell off the land. And also technology, because the Northwest, it's competitive. There's a lot of farmers up here, but with the technology, they have a consistent product, and they're good at what they do. They have it down to a science.
Well, I'd like to go down to the lower 48 and see if those crops are nearly as beautiful as these. All right, thank you, Megan. Appreciate you doing this story for us. Well, still to come, a labor of love, a work of art. See it behind me. A quilt with a story to tell, 80 years of history at the Alaska State Fair. And the story of how the fair came to be, then and now, a showcase for families, farms, and fun. There's a queen-size quilt that does a whole lot more than cover a bed. It's right behind me. It's called The Work of Many Hands and tells the story of the Alaska State Fair. There's a panel for each of the 8 decades of the fair designed by Ruth Holbert, who carefully researched each one, many inspired by her own family memories.
My parents have this vivid memory of a concert they attended when the band was playing, and it was a beautiful evening concert, and the full moon rose over Pioneer Peak, and it was so beautiful that the band just trailed off in the middle of the song, and everybody turned around and watched that moon rise.
Other squares reflect the times like the one for the 80s when the state economy crashed.
The little roller coaster at the fairgrounds is actually called the Alaska Economy. That was the old roller coaster here, because it goes up and it goes down, no matter if the money is there or not. And I thought that was a good thing to remind people of these days with the budget crisis, is that the fair is still fun, even no matter what the economy is doing.
Well, the panel for the last decade has a giant cabbage, which symbolizes how big the fair has grown. And around it are images reflecting the cultural diversity of the fair. Well, that last panel of the quilt is a great reminder that even giant cabbages all start from a little seed. And here we are today with a fair which draws about 300,000 visitors. And joining us to talk about the fair, we have Kelly Larson, who markets the fair. And then we have Talis Kohlberg, director at the Matsu College, but also you've been on the fair board, served there, and you've just had a long time love affair with the fair, as has the artist for the quilt, which is also the poster for this year's fair, Ruth Holberg. Can you tell us a little bit about Ruth's background?
Absolutely. Ruth is a jewel. Born and bred right in Palmer. She's a 4th generation Alaskan. She graduated Palmer High School in 2004, and her first job at the fair was hand painting the signs that are hung around at each of the venue with the details of the day's events.
I bet that it's neat to see kids start out with the fair young and then kind of assume a bigger role.
Well, Ruth's first event at the fair was riding around in her parents' backpack, and she graduated to working at the fair, and she studied under the longtime fair artist Brad Hughes, and she pursued Dean Phipps, the marketing director, and begged him year after year to give her a shot at designing the poster, and we've never regretted it.
Isn't that wonderful? You can home grow your own talent. Well, one of the things that people probably want to know is what's going to happen to this beautiful quilt behind us?
Well, if you're the lucky winner, you can take it home with you. We're going to be raffling off the quilt for funds that will be dedicated to our scholarship program, And we will provide scholarships for junior and senior high school students here in the state of Alaska that are pursuing a college education or a vocational or technical education.
And if you can't win the quilt, at least you can have the poster, right?
Or you can buy quilt squares. We are going to have a select few available at the souvenir booth, so if you don't win, you can always make your own.
So Talis, how do you feel when you see that quilt?
Oh, it brings back a lot of great memories. I used to watch the fair parade in downtown Palmer from my grandfather's office. He was a doctor above the Kozlowski store, and they would have the fair in those days at the Pioneer home site, which is the old fair location. It was the second location. And, it was just great to see the parade come down and then hope to get into the fair soon.
Well, I had asked both of you, like, which is your favorite square, and you pointed out that you like the very first one. Can you tell us a little bit about the images in that very first square?
I think the first one is wonderful for all sorts of reasons. The first day of the first fair in 1936 coincided with the opening of the Knik Bridge, and before that day you could not get to Palmer, Alaska from Anchorage by car.
Hard to imagine, isn't it?
You had to take the train before then to get to Palmer, and so that was a new change, and it was right at the base of Pioneer Peak. And I like that square also because it features two quotes from M.D. Snodgrass, who was the instrumental figure in the founding of the fair. And he had come to Alaska in 1907 with the experiment station system and was an ardent advocate of both agriculture and fairs. And he recalled near his death being a little kid in Indiana seeing hot air balloons and horse races, and that fairs had always held a fascination for him, and he wanted to see that come back into life in Alaska, and he helped try to found the Western Alaska Fair in Anchorage.
And we have some photographs of M.D. Snodgrass and some documents that kind of tell us about the fair.
Yeah, we have with us right here, this is the actual minutes from the Northland Pioneer Grange in 1935, 1936, and M.D. Snodgrass, that's a photo of him when he first came to Alaska in 1907, and he is the person featured on the brochure there from the 1947 fair, which was the 7th fair. And if you do the math, you have to remember the fair shut down for 5 years during World War II. So it was the 7th fair.
Which is represented in the darker sections of the quilt.
Exactly. And that's a stock certificate from the first fair, which had a different name. We weren't a state then. It was the Matanuska Valley Agriculture and Industrial Fair Association. And they raised money by selling stock. And they raised about $1,200 that first year from just basically people donating to start up that.
Isn't it amazing? And the interesting thing in your research is you actually had the very first minutes, and they're written in beautiful handwriting.
Yeah, that's from Miss Emma King, kept meticulous notes from all the Pioneer Grange meetings, and the Grange was formed by basically settlers who had been brought to Alaska by the Alaska Railroad in the 1920s, and they formed the Grange, and they put together the committees for the first fair, and the first reference to it in this page talks about a 3-day fair. It became a 4-day fair that first year.
Now it's 2 weeks.
At one point it was 3 weeks. For the 1998 fair we had the Expo 98, and that was a little bit too long, so it went back down to 2 weeks after
I guess
that.
the fair is ever a work in progress, and maybe we could talk about some of the changes that we've seen over the years. We have a lot of great images from Steve McCutcheon, who was also a member of the Constitutional Convention, I believe, capturing these scenes of the fairs, and I think this was from the 50s.
Yeah, and this would have been a location that's the one I talked about is downtown Palmer, where the Pioneer Home is now located, and that was the second location of the fair. The first fair was in the basement of what's now the Borough Office Building. It slowly progressed, and there were discussions in this very book about whether there should even be a second or third fair, because it was always touch and go to raise the funds and get the people to organize. The fair has always depended tremendously on volunteers. I think there are well over 400 volunteers a year now that make it possible, and they're not compensated.
Well, you know, a lot of people today sort of say, oh, the fair is not as good as it was a long time ago. It's becoming more and more commercial. How do you feel about comments like that?
I think that it is a unique fair compared to most fairs because we are so isolated. So if you go to other fairs in other states or other counties, you start to see a repetitive nature of the same vendors go from fair to fair to fair. It's by the nature of our location hard to do that. So we have a lot more unique vendors at this fair and unique opportunities in this state that just can't be duplicated elsewhere.
Anywhere else.
And I've had opportunities to visit several states across the nation, and there are commercial fairs, and every fair has its purpose. Our purpose is to produce a traditional fair that educates and entertains fairgoers. And
it sounds like you feel very proud of what we've achieved.
I am very proud of our fair. I'm proud of what we have achieved, and I'm not worried about our fair being too commercial. Alaska is unique, our fair is unique, our vendors are unique. Our vendor manager, Pamela Meekin, and the Alaska Vendors Association understand the delicate balance of offering a diversity of products along with keeping the traditions of a hometown country fair.
Well, one of the things that hasn't changed is you've got politicians out there because they know with 300,000 people that they've got a good chance to reach their electorate. And we have some archival footage from the Alaska Moving Image Preservation Association of John F. Kennedy coming to our fair. There he is.
That's actually a famous moment in fair history, and the mayor of Palmer at the time was Dr. Logston, who worked at the experiment station, and he was on the committee that met with Governor Egan, pictured in the background there, and that was a big deal. He was not yet president, and somewhat ironically, he didn't win in Alaska. That was a state that he lost, but and in fact, one of the 3 electoral votes Alaska caught.
There's Bill Egan there.
That's our former governor. M.D. Snodgrass actually cast one of the electoral votes for President Kennedy's opponent. So,
you know, we're contrary to ordinary in Alaska, never can predict, but I heard that he got stuck in the mud, too.
That is a story.
He did, and volunteers came out of the woodwork and helped him get, I believe it was a Lincoln, pushed out of the mud and on his way.
So we talk about the fair being a marketplace of ideas all over the country. How is that in Alaska?
It was one of the intentions of the first fair, and in fact, it's part of the inscription on the first panel there that it's not just for entertaining, but instructing as well. And M.D. Snodgrass was sometimes known as like a apostle of agriculture in Alaska. He was always trying to promote agriculture, and in his mind, fairs were inextricably linked to modernizing farming. And he was really devoted to 40 years of working in agriculture and making things happen. And probably what he's remembered for is the legendary, supposedly first ordinance of Palmer was to restrict his free-ranging pigs from running around Palmer yards, to limit them to his farm.
Well, so, over the years, you know, some things you see stay the same. We have some wonderful archival photographs from the 70s to show you here. When you see past memories like this and the changes in the fair, what occurs to you?
Well, I think I would link it to your prior show showing Ben Vanderweel's farm with a backdrop of subdivisions, and the valley definitely is losing a lot of agricultural land and our heritage as an agricultural community too.
The fair is honored to be holding some farmland in trust for future generations.
So suburbanization has definitely happened, but it remains a link to the farming concepts.
So I have to ask you before we go, each of you, and Kelly, what is it about the fair that you personally love the most?
I love how it brings Alaskans together and it brings people together. It is amazing to be there day after day and watch our sleepy little venue come to life. There's people from all walks of life who work together to build a city, to invite 300,000 of our closest friends to be entertained and have fun.
Yeah, for a few weeks, it's a bigger city than Anchorage, almost.
My favorite ritual, every year I go and buy a caramel apple and ride the Ferris wheel, so when I get to the top of the Ferris wheel, I can see the glacier in the Knik Valley in the background, and there is no other fair in the world where you watch a glacier from a Ferris wheel on a late fall afternoon eating a caramel apple, and I think that's just how I view our fair as just a unique part of America that's very American but very Alaskan at the same time.
That to me, I also enjoy just the increasing diversity of the entertainment. We have sort of an international flavor. So anyway, I want to thank you both for being here with us. And we're going to talk more on the web about this, so watch our web extra because we have just scratched the surface, believe me. Well, up next, pound for pound, this pumpkin had potential until it flopped. Oh, but the great pumpkin rises again in Dale Marshall's pumpkin plot. Up next, we'll show you what's on the vine this year. The perils of a prize pumpkin. Cell phone video recorded its dramatic plunge. Yet, as Lauren Maxwell shows us, Dale Marshall's pumpkin patch is full of promise this year.
Dale Marshall's license plate says it all. If you don't believe it,
this is over 9 feet.
Take a look. The man grows big veggies of all sorts, and many of them are headed to the fair.
So is this still what you would call a hobby?
Or obsession.
But what Marshall is most obsessed with is this.
As of last night, it was estimated at 1,295.
A pumpkin that weighs nearly 1,300 pounds. He started the tiny seed months ago.
The tape on there is every day I can see that thing moving.
Now it's gaining 10 pounds a day and still has 12 days to go.
Could have potentially, you know, almost a 1,500 pounder.
And where would that be in terms of records?
Nowhere, actually. And it won't even be the biggest pumpkin in the state of Alaska, actually.
And he should know, Marshall grew the biggest pumpkin in 2011. At more than 1,700 pounds, it easily eclipsed the state record. But when a small hole was discovered in the bottom, it was disqualified. Then, last year, another tragedy. As a giant crane was lifting the pumpkin for its journey to the fair, a cable snapped and the pumpkin came crashing down.
You know what that saying, stuff happens, you know, just what it was.
So, armed with a good attitude and a few backup pumpkins just in case,
more pumpkins, the better your odds.
Marshall is trying again.
We're just gonna grow them, lift them, take them, and whatever happens, happens.
Hard work plays a big part in what he does, but so does luck. He's hoping this year luck will be on his side. For Frontiers, I'm Lauren Maxwell.
Marshall's pumpkin is not as big as the one that he lost last year, but there's still a good chance that it may set a new state record. Well, next week, we're going to take you to Monk's Lagoon. Although it's not far from Kodiak, most Alaskans have never heard of it. But in the Russian Orthodox faith, this sanctuary on Spruce Island is known as one of the most sacred places on the planet.
It's a real feast for the senses. It just overwhelms you with rather than chaos, peace.
This was the home of a monk named Herman who came here in the early 1800s to live a life of solitude and prayer. But Father Herman discovered that God had other plans for him, and next Sunday, why the Orthodox Church canonized him as a saint, the first in North America known as the Wonder Worker. And now it's time to bring this week's conversation to a close. Hope that when you go to the Alaska State Fair next week that you'll have a new appreciation of how the fair itself was once a brand new frontier. We leave you with historical photos from Steve Siseski. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week.